The grand ballroom was brimming with life. The soft glow of crystal chandeliers bathed the room in warm light, casting long shadows on the polished marble floor. The scent of fresh lilies and roses mingled with the faint aroma of expensive perfume, filling the air with a heady sweetness. Guests, dressed in their finest evening wear, moved about, their laughter and soft chatter adding to the buzz of excitement. Everything seemed perfect, too perfect almost, but in the corner of the room, tucked away from the eyes of the guests, stood Eva. She wasn't quite part of the lively chatter or the celebrations. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the room, watching the flow of her guests with a cold precision. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be a moment of joy, but for Eva, it was nothing but a reminder of the storm brewing beneath her calm surface. Her dress, a pristine white gown of the finest silk, flowed around her like a dream, the delicate lace tracing the curves of her body. Her makeup was flawless, accentuating her striking features. The sharp cheekbones, the full lips, the eyes that never seemed to soften. In the mirror, she barely recognized the woman looking back at her. She was the epitome of control, the one who always had everything under her thumb. But tonight, something felt off. She could feel the weight of the evening settling on her shoulders, pressing down on her, squeezing out the sense of perfection she had carefully constructed for herself. Eva adjusted her veil, a symbol of her transformation from a successful career woman to a wife. She had always prided herself on her ability to control her life, to build a future where everything was meticulously planned. Nothing was left to chance. Yet today, she felt as though the world was slipping out of her grasp. Her gaze flicked to Harrison, the man she was about to marry. He was chatting with his family, his deep voice carrying over the murmur of the room. He was everything Eva had ever wanted in a man. Handsome, successful, attentive. He made her feel secure, his presence like a pillar of stability in the chaos of her life. But the deeper she looked at him, the more she noticed the subtle differences between him and the life she had created for herself. His family, for example, simple, unpolished, unrefined. They didn't belong in her world. She'd tried to ignore it at first. She'd convinced herself that love was enough, that she could overlook their differences. But tonight it felt impossible. The way they laughed so freely, the way they made jokes that felt crude to her, the way they spoke with such ease and comfort, it was everything Eva had spent her life trying to avoid. And now, on the eve of her wedding, it was suffocating her. Harrison had never understood her need for perfection. To him, it was all about family, about being together, about the love they shared. But to Eva, love wasn't enough. She needed more. She needed the life, the image, the status. She needed a man who would elevate her, not drag her down to a world she had spent years trying to escape. Her fingers tightened around her glass of champagne. It should have been a night of celebration, but all she could feel was an icy knot tightening in her chest. Little did she know, tonight wouldn't just be the rehearsal dinner. It would be the beginning of a revelation that would shatter everything she thought she knew about love, family, and herself. As the evening wore on, the hum of conversation grew louder, and the clinking of glasses seemed to echo in Eva's ears. Her mind, however, was far from the lively atmosphere. She could hear the laughter of Harrison's family, loud and boisterous, from across the room. It grated on her nerves, each chuckle, each word, like a needle pricking at her patience. They were so unrefined, so unlike the sophisticated, polished world she was used to. She glanced at Harrison, who was standing next to his younger brother, joking about something Eva couldn't quite hear. His eyes lit up, and his smile, so easy, so genuine, only made the tension in her chest grow. He was so happy, so content. It made her feel inadequate. She didn't belong in his world, and he certainly didn't belong in hers. The thought of marrying him, despite his charm and allure, was starting to feel more like an obligation than a choice. But Eva had worked hard for this. She had built herself up, step by step, from a girl with nothing to a woman with everything. Everything but control over her own emotions. And now, on the eve of her wedding, it seemed like everything was slipping through her fingers. "Isn't this just perfect?" her best friend Mia whispered as she appeared beside Eva, pulling her from her thoughts. Mia's eyes sparkled, watching the guests with admiration. She was one of those people who could find joy in the smallest details. Eva envied her, even though she would never admit it. "It's fine," Eva replied curtly, her gaze still fixed on Harrison. "But it's not what I expected." Mia frowned but didn't press. Instead, she sipped her drink and glanced around the room. "You know, Harrison's family seems nice. They really seem to love you." Eva's lips tightened. "They love the idea of me, not the real me." Her voice was soft, but there was a sharp edge to it, something even Mia didn't quite understand. "They're all so loud. They don't get it." Mia hesitated, sensing the storm brewing inside her friend. "Eva, they just don't know your world. That's all. Give them time." Eva forced a smile, but the thought of time irritated her. Time was something she didn't have. Time was what she'd given to building her image, her life, her success. She didn't need to make space for things that didn't fit. Her marriage to Harrison wasn't just about love. It was about aligning herself with someone who could elevate her, who could put her in the circles she wanted to be in. The evening continued, and at some point, Harrison's father made his way to the front of the room to offer a toast. His voice was deep and warm as he spoke, his words simple but heartfelt. The guests fell silent, listening intently. "We're all here tonight because of one thing: family. It's a bond that can't be broken. Harrison, you're a lucky man to have Eva by your side," he said, smiling fondly at his son. Eva smiled politely, her lips stiff, her eyes fixed on the glass in her hand. She wanted to feel something: pride, gratitude, love, but all she felt was a growing sense of unease. Like a storm gathering on the horizon. His words sounded sincere, but they were not the words of someone who understood what she truly wanted. She wasn't just marrying Harrison, she was marrying the image he represented, the future he could offer her, the status that she craved. As the toast ended, Harrison reached for her hand, squeezing it affectionately. But Eva pulled away slightly, her fingers brushing against his, before she quickly recovered. "Eva, is everything all right?" he asked, a trace of concern in his voice. But she smiled again, too quickly, too forcefully. "Yes, of course," she replied, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm fine." But deep down, she knew it wasn't true. The storm was coming, and no amount of smiles or rehearsed words could stop it. The night had fallen into a tense quiet. The clinking of glasses, the hum of conversations, and the soft music had all faded into the background for Eva. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, drowning out the reality of the celebration happening around her. She could hear Harrison laughing with his friends, but the sound felt distant, like an echo from a world she no longer wanted to be a part of. The unease inside her had reached a breaking point, and she could feel the walls closing in. It wasn't just his family that bothered her anymore. It was everything. The life they were about to build, the compromises she was already making, the image she was losing. She had worked too hard to let it all crumble for a man who couldn't understand her need for control, for perfection. She had never wanted to feel like this disconnected, this suffocated. But now, in the shadow of the wedding that was meant to be the culmination of her dreams, it felt like the chains were tightening. "Eva?" Harrison's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. She turned to face him, trying to mask the tension she could feel building inside her. He was standing in front of her now, his smile warm, his hand extended as he tried to draw her into the circle of friends and family gathered around the ballroom. But there was something different in his eyes tonight. Something she couldn't place. "Come on, you're not really going to stand here all evening. You've got to at least enjoy the night before the big day," he said, his voice light, but there was a flicker of something in his tone that made Eva pause. Her gaze flicked to his family, to the group of people who were so out of place in her world. She felt the tightness in her chest grow. The frustration bubbled over, a tidal wave of emotion threatening to spill. She wanted to scream, to tell him how she felt, how everything about this marriage was wrong, how she felt trapped in a life she didn't want. But before she could speak, Harrison's mother, a woman dressed in a simple yet elegant dress, approached them. Her face was warm, but there was an unmistakable edge of concern in her expression. "Harrison, could we talk for a moment?" she asked, her voice quieter now, as if she were trying to shield their conversation from the rest of the room. Harrison nodded and excused himself from Eva, following his mother to the other side of the ballroom. Eva watched them leave, a knot of confusion twisting in her stomach. Something was happening. Something wasn't right. Her hands trembled, and she instinctively reached for her glass, but it felt heavy in her hand. Then it happened. Harrison returned moments later, his face unreadable. The smile he had once worn so easily was now absent. He stood in front of Eva, eyes dark with something she couldn't place. The room seemed to hold its breath, the tension palpable. "Eva," Harrison began, his voice calm but firm, "I've been thinking. I can't go through with this wedding." Eva blinked, her mind racing to process his words. What are you talking about?" "I've realized. We're not right for each other," he said, his gaze unwavering. "You don't want what I can give, and I don't want to be with someone who doesn't see me for who I really am. Not for my family, not for the image I bring." Eva felt the blood drain from her face, her pulse hammering in her ears. This wasn't happening. Not here. Not now. You're canceling the wedding?" she asked, her voice cracking. Harrison nodded. "I can't marry someone who looks at me and my family as beneath her. I thought I could change that, but I can't. Not anymore." The room seemed to spin. Her hands shook uncontrollably, her body frozen in shock. The man she had planned everything for, the man she had convinced herself was the key to her perfect life, was walking away from her, and she had no idea how to stop it. And just like that, the carefully constructed world she had fought so hard to build came crashing down around her. Harrison's mother looked at her one last time, her expression a mixture of sadness and understanding, before she turned and walked away, leaving Eva standing alone in the center of the ballroom. Eva could barely breathe, the weight of his words suffocating her. All of her plans, her dreams, the perfect life she had so carefully crafted, it was all unraveling in front of her eyes. For the first time in a long time, Eva felt truly, utterly lost. Eva stood there, frozen in the middle of the ballroom, her heart pounding in her chest. Harrison's words echoed in her mind, over and over again, each repetition more agonizing than the last. "I can't marry someone who looks at me and my family as beneath her." The words felt like daggers, cutting deeper with every second. The bustling conversations around her, the music playing softly in the background, it all felt like a distant world, as if she were standing outside her own life, watching it slip through her fingers. Her gaze flicked around the room, looking for something, anything, to ground her. But all she saw were faces, smiling faces that couldn't see her turmoil, couldn't understand the chaos churning inside her. She had been so sure, that this wedding, this life with Harrison, would be the culmination of all her hard work, her ambition, her calculated steps. She had always known what she wanted, and she had built it piece by piece. And yet, here she was, standing on the edge of a cliff she hadn't even known was there, staring down at the wreckage of her future. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not cry here, in front of these people. She couldn't let them see how fragile she really was. She had worked too hard for this image of control, of perfection. Her thoughts were interrupted as Harrison's mother reappeared, this time with a quiet but firm presence. The older woman's eyes were filled with sympathy, but Eva didn't want sympathy. Not now. Not from anyone. "You're a strong woman, Eva," she said softly, her voice steady but laced with sadness. "But sometimes, strength is not about control. It's about knowing when to let go. Let go." The words hung in the air like a weight, pressing down on Eva's chest. She had never considered letting go. She had always believed that control was the only way to navigate the world, the only way to survive. But now, standing here, the illusion of control shattered in an instant. She felt the cold, uncomfortable truth settle in. Harrison's family was right. She had never truly seen him for who he was. She had seen the life he could give her, the status, the image she longed for, but she hadn't seen him. She had been so focused on building her world that she had forgotten what it meant to connect with another person on a deeper level. And now, she has lost it all. "I'll leave," she said quietly, her voice betraying her calm facade. She didn't need to explain herself. She didn't need to defend her choices. It was over. She was done. She turned away, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor as she walked toward the exit. The weight of her decision hung heavy, but a strange sense of clarity began to settle over her. As she stepped out into the cool night air, she took a deep breath, allowing herself the space to feel. The chaos inside her began to quiet, and for the first time in months, she felt something that was not fear or anxiety. She felt free. Eva knew that her journey wasn't over. The life she had built wasn't the life she wanted after all. But in the aftermath of the storm, there was a new possibility. One where she could rebuild from the ground up. Not with the expectations of others, but with her own desires and values at the forefront. And as she stood there in the quiet of the night, she allowed herself to believe, just for a moment, that maybe she didn't need to control everything. Maybe, just maybe, letting go was the first step toward truly finding herself. Eva's story serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of striving for perfection at the expense of authenticity. Throughout the entire narrative, she is driven by a need to control every aspect of her life, her image, her relationships, and her future. To her, control was synonymous with success, and success was the ultimate goal. But as her carefully constructed world began to crumble, she was forced to confront the deeper, often hidden costs of her relentless pursuit. The first moral of this story is that true success is not found in external validation or the image we project to the world. For Eva, the relationship with Harrison was never about love, but about building a perfect life that fit into the mold she had imagined for herself. She didn't see him as a partner, but as a stepping stone to her ideal future, a future filled with status, security, and power. But in focusing on her ambitions and her plans, she lost sight of the most fundamental part of any meaningful relationship: connection. True success comes not from the outside world's approval, but from the inside, from knowing who we truly are and having the courage to live authentically, regardless of the expectations placed upon us. The second moral is about the power of letting go. Eva spent so much of her life trying to control every detail, striving to keep everything in place so that nothing would slip through her fingers. But sometimes, the most powerful and transformative decision one can make is to relinquish control. The moment Harrison walked away, Eva had two choices: to fight, to force her plans back into place, or to step into the unknown and allow herself the freedom to evolve. It was in that moment, when she chose to let go, that she began to see the possibility of true freedom. The freedom to become who she was meant to be, not who she thought she should be. Letting go doesn't mean surrendering to failure. It means having the strength to accept that some things are beyond our control, and that this acceptance can open doors to a new, more authentic path. Another lesson embedded in this story is the idea that we often misplace our priorities in the pursuit of perfection. Eva had everything she thought she wanted: wealth, status, a future built on a marriage to Harrison. But what she failed to realize was that these were external markers of success, not internal ones. She had never asked herself what she truly needed to feel fulfilled. Her obsession with perfection had blinded her to the things that really mattered: love, trust, vulnerability, and true emotional connection. This is a reminder to everyone that no amount of success, no amount of material gain can replace the deeper, intangible aspects of life that give it meaning. True fulfillment comes from cultivating a sense of balance, from knowing that our worth is not measured by the people we associate with or the things we acquire, but by the way we live our truth. Finally, Eva's journey is a powerful reminder that it's never too late to change. Even when the foundations of her world were shattered, she found within herself the strength to walk away, to choose a new path. Life is full of unexpected twists and turns, and while we may not always have control over our circumstances, we always have the power to choose how we respond. Sometimes, our greatest growth comes after we face our deepest disappointments. Eva's transformation is proof that our mistakes don't define us. It's what we choose to do with them that matters. When we embrace the lessons learned from hardship and let go of the need for perfection, we open ourselves to the possibility of a richer, more fulfilling life. So, when life forces us to let go of our plans and our illusions, it might just be the universe's way of telling us that there's something far better waiting for us. A life that is real, grounded, and ours to create. Ultimately, Eva's story is one of redemption, of finding strength in vulnerability, and of learning that the most important thing we can control is our own growth.